Hello YouTube, today in this new Weak Point Wednesday, we're going to talk about real delts. And I hope you will be able to hear me over this massive rain tempest that we have outside. So, as far as real delts goes, it's interesting because it's one of those body parts where a lot of people will tell you that if you're not on drugs, you will not be able to develop them. I also think about the upper chest, the traps. These are areas that are supposedly only really possible to develop when you take some products. And I personally disagree with that. I do think that people who take those products have a tendency to develop them even without really putting any thoughts into it, just because there are so many androgen receptors in the zone. But that doesn't mean that as a natty you can't develop them. It's just that you're going to have to employ certain strategies. So as far as the real delts goes, it's sort of the same logic that I apply for the traps. If you want to grow them, you cannot rely on compound movements and you cannot apply conventional thinkings to that area. Why? Because for the most part, you're going to find ways to isolate that muscle, and also you're going to have to find the right movement. You need to find the right thing that is really going to fire it up. So for traps, for example, I think that anyone should try a weighted stretch. The real delts is sort of the same, meaning that a weighted stretch can be beneficial. Something that I really like for real delts is snatch grip. I do a ton of things, snatch grip, and you'll feel that when your hands are out there, there's a lot of tension on the delt, but because the weight is pulling on your back, it's really the back of the delt that is being stretched. And that's a good way to apply that strategy to that muscle group. That is also going to cover your strength work for the real delt. Because let's face it, unless you want to do super heavy face pulls, which I do not advise you do, doing strength work for something so small like the real delts is actually quite complicated because you don't have the ability to move a lot of weight. So a good way to approach it is to just say, hey, I'm going to pick a compound movement that is going to also involve a lot of real delt, and I'm going to modify it so that this involvement is even more accentuated. And usually pulls from the floor or from blocks are a good way to do that. So that's one thing. Just because it's a small muscle group doesn't mean that you can only do lightweight with it. You can also do heavyweight and high intensity work. As far as isolation movements for the real delts, where the only part of the body that is going to be targeted is that group, it's not really possible. You're always going to have another portion of the muscle that's going to be involved. So for example, a lot of presses that involve the real delts also involve the other heads of the shoulders. A lot of pulls that involve the real delts also involve the traps. That's fine. You do not need to really apply the concepts of isolation 100%. It's just a concept. It's totally fine if other muscles are being worked. Actually, it's a good thing because you're getting more bangs for your buck. So as far as isolation movements, face pulls are really good. I advise you to do them with a spry or with bands and play around with your hand placement, play around with the external rotation and see what hits the real delts the best. High volume, high intensity, high volume, low intensity, high frequency real delts are very good for the health of your shoulders and they are good for the size of the real delts. It's an application of nucleus overload that works really well. A lot of people got a lot of good results from that, me included. So that's one way. Another lift that I really like for the real delts is the Arnold raises. If you want to know how to do them, they're in the road to bigger shoulders. And basically what you do is you do a shoulder elevation on a bench in a certain way that is going to let you stretch the real delt at the bottom and get a full contraction at the top when the arm is both ways perpendicular with the floor. This, I highly encourage you to give it a shot. It is insane. And when it comes to creating mind-muscle connection with the real delts, I do not know of any lift that is better than that. After that, for real delts, I also like Mido's raises. Same thing, it's in the playlist. They're not as good, they're more focused toward the side delts, but they do burn the real delt quite a bit. And as far as that goes, it's pretty much all I have to tell you, because it's the same for most muscle groups. You don't need 1,000 movements, but it's especially true with the small ones. Like the real delts, having one heavy compound and one movement or two that you do in isolation with low weights for high reps, it's all you really need. And then you're going to find out that something like the real delt, when you start isolating it, it's going to have zero work capacity because it's a small muscle on top of that. So you're not going to be able to isolate it for much. Like when you start, you'll do 3 sets of isolation and you'll be burned for like 3 days. After a while, your ability to recover is going to catch up and you might be able to do it every 2 days or even every day if you manage your intensity right. But don't let yourself get trapped in the mindset of only doing isolation for that body part once every 7 days and never trying to graduate from that. You should try and evolve because the muscle is going to evolve. It's going to gain size. And as far as building 3D delts, the rear part of the delt is super important. And I've personally made great strides and I've really improved the look of my shoulder with that strategy. So I encourage that you do the same. If you have any questions about the real delts, about how to approach it, let me know. I will eventually make a video on how to approach training a new body part to not risk injury and to promote hypertrophy, but that will be for another video. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.